Alrighty folks, want to welcome you back to another video from Yates Computers Tips and Reviews. So the last ones I've gone through for this year, more rabbit hole videos, more of pretty much the same subjects I've touched on, but they've kind of changed some this year with this new realization of you don't really need a SATA drive anymore. So a lot of these cases have changed, and that brings in a whole different factor in cooling. So this was one of these factors that I've touched a lot on in the case video already. So I don't know how long this video will be. It's probably going to be pretty short. But your newer cases. A lot of people for gaming PCs and other things like that are big on water cooling. It used to be a little tough to do a water cool system in a computer like this, because you have to put in a radiator with fans and all of that type of stuff. This is actually an old, obsolete case. But today you can buy cases and computers with this structure. I've talked about quite a few things that have been wrong with this case and cooling wise. In the front here, there's 2 spots for 2 fans. In the back here, there's 2 spots for 2 fans. There are no fans there. So there is no airflow being pushed in or pulled out other than what your heat is being generated actually from your power supply. Only real circulation in the case is from the heat being pushed out of your CPU. So there is no real cooling going on here. This is a basic setup. 1 fan and 1 of these in both spots would have been really good. Having both fans in there would probably be the optimal best way to do it. Knowing your cooling packages. New cases now, again, feels kind of weird to say you don't need a SATA drive. They don't have all of this. And again, new cases, usually the power supply is down here on the bottom. But there are some where the power supply is on top. I've seen it. It's kind of an interesting, funny thing. And I've seen reviews on those cases where they have the radiator on the bottom. There's a slot in the bottom and venting on the bottom. Well, that to me is just weird. How much space do you have on the bottom of that case to draw the air in? And then if you have a giant video card in there, there's builds you can go see. It's kind of blocking your airflow in. And then you have these big giant heat sinks on these new CPUs that take a lot of space. There's cases where the radiator goes on the front. None of this is there. There's cases where it goes on the top. So it's nicer now because you can get cases this size that have none of this in there. Your power supply can be down here on the bottom. Your drive bays are down here on the bottom. Everything's down here on the bottom. So now you have the entire front, top, back plate side to do your cooling. Some of the newer computers we got in have big giant fans on the front just blowing air in, has a couple fans on the back blowing air out. That's your air cool. And of course, it's got the big fan on the CPU. It's got the fan in the power supply, circulating the air. It's got an onboard video. It's got an add-on card for a second monitor. Of course, it's not a 3090 or 4090 video card or anything like that. It's just a cheaper standard video card for a standard display. Has a little tiny fan on it, no big deal, no major things. These are factors that come into play with cooling. That'd be fine. When you get into water cooling, running pipes, where your reservoir is, where your pump is, where your radiator is, where your fans are, this becomes a bigger problem. With today's age, with this no SATA drives, very little SATA drives, due to NVMe, due to the M.2 platform being actually on the motherboard. I have the video talking about that I've already done. That opens up a lot of space. Everything being digital downloaded, being saved to USB drives, to external hard drives. You don't need a burner. You don't need a USB. You don't need card readers. You don't need a lot of things added. Floppy drives. You don't need any of that stuff in these front bays anymore. That opens up this whole front of this case for whole other reasons. Leaves you a lot more space in there to do what you need to do. Makes it possible for things like my unboxing of that little computer. Now you can get things into smaller spaces with, a single fan circulating air through. Makes things a lot more practical and possible with the airflow system. Getting rid of all these cables, cable management has been part of the issue for a long time with cases. I think they've kind of gone a little too far on that, where now everything routes behind. Your fan controllers are behind, everything's behind. One of the reasons it's done that way is for clear cases, so that it looks good when you look in, and you can have all your lighting, and you can have all these things that you want in there that really don't affect the performance of the system. It's now a look. It's how it looks. It's the ooh and ah factor. What kind of graphic and etching and stuff is on your video card, and what your CPU cooling fan looks like, and is it chrome, is it silver, is it gold, there's a lot of these other factors that come involved in the look of what's inside the case now. So there's a lot of other factors that have happened inside this case. Water cooling, clear pipe, colored pipe, hard pipe, flex pipe. There's all kinds of different piping and other things you can do. Your reservoirs, what round, squared, what color. There's a lot of pumps, same things. Fans, LED, non-LED, radiator, sizes, colors. Now you can get a completely white computer inside. Fans are white, radiators white, pipes white, video card white, fan, whatever, water cooling, you won't have a fan, but air cooling, you can have a white cooling system. So it's all white in there. You could have white backlighting, you could have white everything. There's one time there were other colors for video cards and other boards, green and blue, I believe, were out there for a while. There are other things out there, if you looked, you can find. So it changes the case, changes your cooling factor because of the ooh and ah of it. Clear panels, where? Front, back. There's some that are pretty much completely clear. there's test bench kind of computers designs that I've seen. Has the back panel, it's clear, it has a clear front. I think it had like a space between the side and the front panel for the air to go through, and it had a solid like plexiglass front. There's a lot of things out there that will affect your cooling. And of course, if you have, radiator system with it on your CPU and even on your graphics card, you could get a water block for that. You might do one of those unique case structures that it doesn't matter about your air cooling because you're not using the air cool. That you can use some of those unique cases for the ooh and ah factor. If you're a gamer, maybe there's some advantages to that. I know water cooling is supposed to be a big benefit for gaming. So this is why I wanted to go through some of this little cooling factors, because it's a domino effect that has taken place. Because it's not really necessary for you to have all this anymore. And what was funny is some of the computers that we got in, when they came in, I looked at them and they felt really funny. Like, why is this system look and feel so funny? And I could not figure it out until I went to replace the system that system was going to go replace. And I set it down and the system was this wide. Or long. And now, oh, that's the difference. The case is smaller. Why was the case smaller? Well, they didn't need all this space anymore. And it's an air-cooled case where they had fans that then went here in the front. So this was wasted space. All this material that they would have to use extra, less material, less cost to build it. Of course, they didn't lower the cost to the individuals, but it was kind of an interesting little like, oh, whoa, that was kind of weird, because then it would, and okay, well, that's nice, because sometimes this is a little long, like when you put it under the desk, it's pretty much as long as the desk and you hit your legs on it. You put that little one under the desk, you have that much more space underneath the desk to clear. So these were just some of the little things that were kind of like a shocker when it came to cases and cooling. And not needing a SATA drive. Now, that computer does support SATA drives. It does support the old-fashioned spinning mechanical drive. They're just not here. Power supply's here. There's a bay here. And there's a bay here for drives. That's it. It has the small DVD burner writer in there. It just has the metal slot. Smaller than that on the top. So it's on the top of the case. It's not along the whole front. So for a cooling factor, that's something different to consider. Because now, and you can get air-cooled computers that might be a little smaller to fit in, maybe to set on top of the desk. Because to put this one on top of the desk, it hangs over. I can't really show it, but it hangs over the end of the desk and hangs off. That other computer I got would probably fit here perfectly because it's the shorter case, and it's airflow. So these are just some of those little tiny variables I wanted to go through between airflow and water or cooling. You can go do more research, do more homework on it, but these were some of those factors I wanted to bring into, I guess, 2023 and 2024 light, because without having to have a SATA drive because everything can go to M.2 that's on the actual board, or an add-on card that basically goes right here. You don't need this. So it's a huge variable in cooling also, because these run warm, run hot, put more heat into your case. I know those do also. There's heat sinks and other things that supply the heat out. So again, that's another factor I wanted to touch base on, because now you have M.2 drives on your board, multiple ones, let's say 2 of them, and you do not have an internal video card, you have the one on the motherboard. You don't have an add-on. You decide to go water cool that CPU. Trick question. You're water cooling your case, right? Do you have air cool in that case also? Yes, you do. What is going on with your radiator? Put the radiator in there, you put fans to blow air. That is withdrawing air from your case out. So I like to call it a combination cooling and not really water cooling, because a lot of people get the mistaken thought that everything is water cooled in there, that there's no airflow in there. Yeah, there's airflow that goes through that case. So that means the room you have to have it in has to have the airflow and circulation also. You can't put that case in a room that's 120 degrees and expect it to be 40 degrees. So I wanted to touch base on that, because air cool and water cool still deal with the same kind of environment you're dealing with. So water cooling will actually transfer more of the heat from the CPU out the radiator and blow it out, instead of putting it in the case that will then warm up your memory and other things. So it transfers that heat away. It does not really cool the entire area. It's cooling that CPU. So you still have that airflow that goes through there. So that is kind of an important factor I wanted to bring up, that I know I've had people ask me, they get a little confused, especially now that you have the M.2s. Maybe you're looking more at air cooling because you think that's better off than water cooling. Water cooling is actually a combination of both, because you still have air going through and air cooling the radiator that then puts cool water to the CPU. So it is actually moving your cooler that you would have from your CPU to your water block, if that helps you out to understand it. You still need the airflow. So that is one of those little factors that kind of made this a little interesting, with out having to have these in there that, yeah, these still put out heat and warm up. Those still put out heat and warm up. Having that airflow going through is still the same if it's the M.2 or the SATA. It's just location of where. And again, you get rid of all of this other cabling and all this other stuff that now a lot of them where, yeah, you put this kind of fan in there, that kind of size fan in there, two of them in the front, two of them in the back. The new computers, they have like a big fan in there. And there's like two of those in the front. So they're like twice as much the size of air circulating through. So I kind of thought that was an interesting concept and a very interesting change in the cases. So did a video on the cases to explain that. Well, that also changes your airflow, changes your cooling. Now that you have these big monster video cards, maybe you need to have that extra cooling. Maybe taking out some of this structure in here is a better suit for your environment. Maybe it's not. Maybe, like I said, I have a computer that has a secondary card in it. It's just an old card, little fan on it. It's not one of these 3090s, 4090 cards. It's not one of these high, big performance cards that put out a lot of heat and a lot of circulation. And again, these newer cards actually vent out the back also. So if the new card is blowing air through the card and blowing air out the back, you need to provide the air in for it to blow out. So that's some of these scenarios when it comes to air cool. Having those bigger fans and having all this stuff out of the way really can help you out. And if you're one of these really extreme people that have dual, like 4090s in there, with the beast of a power supply, I mean, I'd have to do some research to figure out if that's really even possible nowadays because of the heat factor and all the voltage and everything that thing's pulling. I'm pretty sure they've done some testing on it. But even if you have, the 30 series dual cards, you might need all of this out of the way to get that airflow in. Because now you have that card pushing air out and you have that card pushing air out. And the motherboard design. I've talked about that before on that last video. There's motherboards designed to support those cards. The slots are spaced out far enough to put those cards in. Knowing your expansion slots to make sure you have enough slots. They're spaced out enough that it's big enough for you to put all of that in there. Knowing those little factors is basically the keys to the air cool, water cool situations. But I thought it was really, again, interesting to think of. You don't need a SATA drive in there. Everything's on the motherboard. No more wiring. No more of that stuff. Talked about the wire management, how it's kind of caught and carried away in the case designs where everything wraps around the back and all of that stuff. And then you open that back panel and it's just all wires. All of that type of stuff. Being able to eliminate all of this stuff to even run it that way is nice. If you have a modular power supply, you can unhook those cables and remove all of that stuff. Less to wire manage in the backside. That seems like a huge helpful event. So it kind of seems nicer in a lot of ways, but it's one of those things that to let everybody know of. So if you get a new computer and a couple years down the road you open it up because you have an issue and you go, well, where's my drive? Because you're looking for this and none of this is here and all you see is this. Because a lot of them have heat sinks and stuff, nicer boards where they lock in and they have heat sinks. Some of them, the drives are actually on the backside. So knowing that and knowing what's there and where to find it and how to find it is kind of an interesting subject. How you cool it. Mention that some boards have drives on the backside. Mention all that wire management that's running back behind there and it's all across the back. If you eliminate a lot of this and you don't have a lot of that running back there and you have your bare minimums, I'm sure that'll help cool it. I'm sure that's not something a lot of people have thought about, is that back cooling, how that's done. So wanted to go through and do that for cooling because that is the changes that I've seen that I wanted to bring up. So I want to wrap this one up. Thank everybody for watching Yates Computers Tips and Reviews. Head on over, hit subscribe, hit the bell to get the updates, and forward out my posts. Let people know I'm out there. Let people know about these videos because this is something that is probably going to affect a lot of people here with Windows 11, Windows 12. You buying a new system here because your old system doesn't support the new system and the support stops. You want to make sure you have your support. You want to make sure you have your updates. You go out and buy a new computer. You might get something short like we got, and it took me a little while to figure it out until I put it next to the other one and went, hey, that one's shorter. That's actually nice because I had it sitting on the desk. Now I have 6 more inches. Maybe that's a factor in you going out and buying a computer. Maybe you need something slimmer to fit underneath a space in your desk. Maybe you want one of those little tinies. They advertise them as an i7, i5, Celeron. It's up to you what you want to do. Because now the cooling packages have changed so much due to the M.2 NVMe drives. Again, I want to press out NVMe and SATA drives, M.2s. Be careful. Know which one you're getting because of the speeds. Truthfully, they're probably good enough for almost everybody except for if you're gaming. But, of course, you want the NVMe because it's so much faster. Because once it's in there, you might not know what you got when you're buying something. Knowing what's in that case, the motherboard and all of that is very important. Understanding cooling. Because some of those units, you don't know who made it, might run really hot. Understanding that cooling is important. You might not want to get something that small because it might run too warm, causing your AC to turn on a lot, causing a lot of things. Maybe you need to find something a medium form factor. They have some smaller units that would still fit there very nicely that are bigger. Same specs, same information. So this is the cooling factors. Knowing your case, knowing your chassis, knowing fan locations. Mentioned it before in other videos about when you open up a case that's pre-manufactured or a computer pre-manufactured. Like this one, it has 2 fan slots here, 2 fan slots there. There's no fans. Maybe you need to put one in. Make sure you got the header on your board. Find the right adapter, modifier. Maybe they have new fans with the new modern connector to plug in, get the power. So you actually can use some of that air cooling. draw in, push out at least one fan so you can get some air cool. So I think I'll wrap this one up. I think I've gone on long enough on a simple thing as fans. Fan headers are on the board. Of course, that's motherboard issues stuff. Knowing that some of this stuff probably isn't there anymore. Size of cases, all those type of things. Wire management. All of these factors come into play with cooling. Of course, we don't have the big IAD cables. Got the small SATA cables now. So now you might not even have SATA cables because it's going to be all M.2. All this stuff would be gone. So wanted to go through that for cooling. Alrighty, thank you so much.